Chapter 3 Keen woke with a sense of unaccustomed luxury, and for a moment was at a loss to account for it. Then he realized that it was the sweetness of the air, strange to his nostrils after so many months of an atmosphere that, despite the hard-working rectifiers of the limbo, was anything but sweet. He wondered casually where the red Peri secured her colony's supply of oxygen. The red Peri! He sat up sharply at the memory of the fantastically lovely pirate princess, for despite the reassurance of the girl Elsa, he mistrusted the intentions behind the Peri's mocking green eyes. He rose, fumbled for the light switch, and glanced at his wristwatch. Though night and day were one in the cavern, he perceived that Pluto's 10-hour night was past, and that whatever daylight the black planet enjoyed was trickling over it. Old Nestor still slept. Keen pulled a hanging aside and found water in a tiny pool. He bathed and pulled on the shirt, shorts, and shoes that were the only clothing he possessed. He ran his hand over his sandy one-day beard, but his razor was inaccessibly remote on the limbo. Then he turned to see old Solomon's pale blue eyes blinking at him. "Morning," he grunted, "glad to see we weren't murdered in our sleep by our pleasant hostess." Solomon Nestor nodded. "I haven't slept so well since we left Nivea," he quavered. "Fresh air is a blessing." "Yes, wonder where she gets it." "Mines it, I don't doubt," said Nestor. "There are millions of tons of it frozen out on the surface." "That's true." "And," continued the old man, "did you notice anything queer about it?" "No, except that it smells good and fresh." "I did. When that yellow-haired girl Elsa lighted the Peri cigarettes, did you notice the cast of the flame? Purple, distinctly purple." "So what?" "Why, it means neon. Nitrogen is scarce here. Hervey and Kaspari both said that, and so they use neon as their filler. No one can breathe pure oxygen, and neon is a good substitute for nitrogen, nearly the same density, and absolutely inert and non-poisonous. That's important to remember. It may help us." "Help us?" The old man waggled his head. "You'll see." "Say," asked Keen suddenly, "what is the explanation of the cave entrance? We walked right through it, vacuum on one side, air on the other. She said they did it with a field, remember?" "I remember. She meant an electrostatic field. You know that like charges repel, and the molecules of air battering against the field acquire the same charge. They're repelled. They can't cross the field. It's like the electric wind from a static discharge, but here the wind that tries to blow in just balances the wind that tries to go out. Result, no wind either way." "But we walked through it. Motion through a field produces a current. I didn't feel any." "Of course not. You didn't walk through at a mile per second like a gas molecule, did you? Whatever current your motion produced was instantly grounded through your body and spacesuit, which are conductors. Air at normal pressure is a very poor conductor, so it retains its charge. Gases do retain static charges, as witness ball lightning." "I see," muttered Keen. "Clever. Better than an airlock, as far as convenience goes, though heat must radiate away through the field. But if they use atomic heat, they can afford a little waste." "There'd be less lost there," said Nestor, "than to the rock walls. Heat could radiate, true enough, but it couldn't escape by conduction. A vacuum is the best heat insulator there is. Look at our thermos containers on the limbo. Radiation at temperatures below red heat is a very slow process, and remember that too." "I will," grunted Keen, "but right now I'm remembering that we have had no breakfast. Do you suppose her method of execution is slow starvation?" He strode over to the door and pounded vigorously on it. "Hey! Hey out there!" There was no response. Irritably, he seized the knob and rattled it, and almost fell backward as the door swung smoothly open. It was unbarred. "I'll be hanged!" he exploded. He peered into the deserted corridor. "Do you suppose this is Elsa's doing?" "If it is, it's not much help," said old Solomon. "No, all the same, I'm going to take a look around. Come on, perhaps we can find some spacesuits." "You'd need the key to the Red Peri, too, or at least the key to the limbo, if they've locked it. I think." Old Nestor's brow wrinkled. "I'll sit right here and figure out something I've been thinking of. Even old heads sometimes get ideas." "Suit yourself," grunted Keen, with very little faith in the potential ideas of the impractical old scientist. He strode boldly into the passageway. There was no one visible. He turned left and proceeded toward the entrance of the cavern. Ahead of him, a figure came suddenly out of an aisle, a feminine figure. He recognized the girl Elsa, carrying a bright aluminum spade, and called her name softly. She turned. "Hello," she said briefly, as he fell into step beside her. "Been burying some pirate treasure, Elsa?" "No, just some seeds in the garden." "Did you unlock our door?" he asked. Yes, the Peri ordered it unlocked." "Ordered it? Why?" "Why not? Can you escape from here?" She gestured at a massive metal door as they passed. "Behind that is her room, and behind another within it are the spacesuits and the keys to both ships. You're as much a prisoner as ever." "I know, but isn't she afraid, of violence? We could kill her." "She isn't afraid of anything," said Elsa. "Anyway, what good would killing her do? It would be simply committing suicide." "That's true," said Keen. They were approaching the entrance with its invisible electrostatic seal. Now they stood staring out over the dismal, black, airless Plutonian valley, where 1,000 feet away was the dark cylinder of the limbo. Suddenly, a flare of light appeared beside it, flashed a moment, then vanished. "What's that?" he asked sharply. "Father's out there welding your jet. She thinks she may have a use for your ship." "For what?" "I don't know. It has exactly the lines of a League guard rocket. Perhaps she plans to use it as a decoy." "And perhaps," said a cool voice behind them, "as a flying mausoleum with you two among the occupants." They whirled. The Red Peri was approaching with her steps muffled by the soft buskins on her feet. Beside her stalked Marco Crandy. Keen did not fail to note Elsa's flush as she met the gaze of the dark man, but he felt a surge of anger at himself as he realized that his own face was reddening under the green eyes and mocking smile of the red-haired girl. He spat angrily. "You're a pleasant player when you hold all the cards." She said only, "Have you eaten breakfast?" "No." "Well, perhaps that explains your ill temper. Elsa, go order a tray for two, sent to my room, and one to Professor Nestor. And you, Marco, suppose you leave me." "Here with him." She laughed and tapped an automatic at her belt.
"I can take care of myself. Do you doubt it? You can go, Marco."
He muttered, "Yes, Commander," and backed reluctantly away. The Red Peri turned her glorious, taunting eyes on Keen, smiled again, and said,
"I've checked over your ship. Your story's straight enough."
"Well, what about us, then?"
"Oh, I haven't decided. You may have to die. It's more than likely that you will, but with no malice on my part, purely as a matter of convenience, you understand."
He grunted. "Why do you have our door unlocked?"
"Why not? I'm sure you can't escape. Look here."
She took the bright aluminum spade Elsa had placed against the wall and thrust it half through the field into the airless outdoors beyond. He stared at it, except for a slight change in color as its crystals rearranged under the slow radiation of its heat. It seemed unaltered. When the knuckles of her dainty hand began to whiten with the cold of the metal, she tossed the implement on the floor at her feet. Now it changed. Instantly, white frost formed on the part which had been exposed. Glittering crystals grew an inch-thick fuzzy covering and began to spread along the handle. They sprang out as swift as the second hand on a watch, an inch, 2 inches deep. The Peri laughed.
"Would you like to stroll outside?"
she jibed.
"It's not cold, just 10 above zero. Above absolute zero, I mean. Cold enough to liquefy and freeze all gases but hydrogen and helium. How long do you think it would take to freeze that hot blood and hotter head of yours?"
"Bah," he said. "What's to keep me now from overpowering you, dragging you into some room, and using you as a hostage to bargain for our safety?"
"If you could," she retorted coolly, "even then it would be a poor idea. If you killed me, your own death would follow very soon and very painfully. If you didn't, I'd never be bound to any promises you wrung from the others. Your wisest course is to leave things as they are until I decide what to do with you. And incidentally," she added, with a narrowing of her green eyes, "don't pin your faith on Elsa."
"On Elsa?" He was startled. "What do you mean?"
"Oh, I know she hates me. She's in love with Marco, or fancies so. I amuse myself by tormenting her, and I suspect that she'd go to some lengths for revenge. But she's quite as helpless as you. As a matter of fact, I'm doing her a good turn, for Marco is not particularly honorable. So I save her and ensure his loyalty to me, all with one stroke."
"You devil!" Keen gasped. "If there's one thing I'd like above all else, it's to drag you to justice. Ever since that day on the Ardkin—"
"When I pinched your nose?"
she queried sweetly.
"Here, then."
With the rapid snap of her hand, she twisted the same member with painful violence, laughed into his exasperated face, and turned away.
"Come on," she ordered. "Here's breakfast."
"I'll be damned if I'll eat with you," he snarled. She shrugged.
"As you like. This is all the breakfast you'll get, I promise you."
After all, breakfast was breakfast, he growled, and followed her to the massive metal door. As it swung open, he forgot a part of his anger in sheer amazement at the luxury of her chamber. She had, apparently, culled the prize plunder of a score of raids to furnish this room. There were deep silken rugs on the floor, rich tapestries, paintings from the salon of some luxurious Venusian liner, delicately worked aluminum furniture, even a carved mirror whose utter perfection must have originated in the incomparable lost art of Mars. The man who bore the breakfast tray placed it silently on a table and withdrew. Here was another surprise. Eggs, and fresh ones too, judging by the smell.
"Oh, we have a few chickens," said the Red Peri, reading his glance. "Enough to supply me at least. Feeding them is rather a problem, you see."
Keen remembered his anger in time to reply with an irritable hump. For a moment he wondered why the exquisite presence of the Peri should affect him so violently, for he realized that much of his irritation was directed at himself. But of one thing he was certain, and that was that his most ardent desire was to humble the arrogant, self-sufficient, proud, and mocking pirate princess, to see her pay the assigned penalty for her crimes. Then he frowned. Was he anxious to see her punished? What he really wanted was simply to see her arrogance and insolence humbled, to see her, frightened or pleading with him as a sort of recompense for the contemptuous way in which she treated him. She spoke.
"You're a silent table partner," she observed, "and yet I'm rather glad you two blundered in. I was getting frightfully tired and bored. I was considering paying a little visit to civilization."
"I suppose you realize," he growled, "that if we ever get back to Earth, your little visits are over. I'd be very glad to furnish a full description of the red Peri."
"And do you think I'm the only redhead alive?"
"You're probably the most beautiful, and you know it." She laughed contemptuously.
"Keen, if you think you can play the sophisticated giver of compliments to my innocence, think again. I've been around. I've spent enough time in London, Paris, and New York to know the social game. In fact, I have a carefully built-up identity there. My terrestrial friends think I live on Venus. So don't try what they call a fishnet on me."
Her words gave him an idea. "Fishnet?" he echoed with a deliberate air of sadness. "No, it's just that I have the misfortune to be about half in love with you, while the other half is pure hatred." Suddenly he wondered how much of a lie that really was. She laughed again.
"I half believe you."
"Which half?"
"Never mind. But," she added derisively, "whichever half it is, remember that it takes a better man than you to win the red Peri's love."
"I didn't say I wanted it," he snapped. "All you are to me is a vicious lawbreaker, and all I want is the chance to see you taken."
"Which you'll never have,"
she returned coolly. She leaned back in her chair and slipped a cigarette from a box.
"Smoke?"
she asked. It was in the nature of a peace offering. He accepted both the truce and the cigarette, and puffed with thorough enjoyment.
"Keen,"
said the Peri,
"would you like to see our establishment?"
He nodded. If the girl were proffering friendship, or at least tolerance, he was in no position to refuse it while she held the upper hand. But he would not accept it under false colors. "Listen," he said, "there are a lot of things I like about you. You've plenty of courage, and you've the devil's own beauty. But get this, if I see any chance of escape, or any chance to capture you, I'm taking it. Is that plain?" She nodded.
"Keen, if you ever outwit the red Peri, you're welcome to your winnings. But you never will."
She rose, and he followed her into the stone-walled corridor, glancing briefly at the mysterious archway with its invisible electrostatic seal. "If your power ever failed," he said, "what would happen to your air here?"
"It won't fail. It's generated directly from disintegration. No moving parts at all, but if it should," she gestured to the cavern roof, "there's an emergency air door. It will close instantly if there's any appreciable outward current. There's plenty of power to retain our atmosphere. We only keep a pressure of 11 to 12 pounds.
"About the same as the altitude of Denver," he muttered as he followed her. "Prepared for anything, aren't you?" He was really impressed by the neat little gardens in the side aisles, raised on Plutonian soil, carefully selected for the proper elements.
"But nitrogen is a troublesome job," she explained. "There's little of it to be had, and what there is all mixed with frozen argon. We fractionate it, and then form ammonia, and so finally get it into usable form."
"I know the process," he said. They penetrated deeper into the series of caverns that pierced the black Plutonian mountain. The fluorolux lights were fewer now, and there were long stretches of dim side passages with no lights at all.
"They're sealed off," said the Peri. "We're approaching the seal of the main cavern now. Do you see where it narrows ahead there? There's an electrostatic seal, but the side passages are blocked with concrete to keep out the crystal crawlers."
"The crystal crawlers?" echoed Keen. He had almost forgotten those curious creatures of the Plutonian Valley. "Why don't they come through the electrostatic seal?"
"They do, but they seldom get far. You'll see why."
"What are the things?" he asked. "Are they alive? No one, Arsuki or Hervey or Kaspari, ever reported them."
I think they originated in these caverns. This whole region is honeycombed, and those in the valley are just strays. Explorers wouldn't be apt to encounter them."
"But are they alive?" he persisted.
"No,"
said the red Peri slowly.
"not exactly alive. They're on the borderline. They're chemical crystalline growths, and their movement is purely mechanical. There are half a dozen varieties, aluminum feeders, and iron and silicon and sulfur feeders, and others."
She smiled impishly.
"I have a use for at least one sort. Do you remember, or did you notice, the safe of the Ardkin? An iron feeder comes in very handy at times."
He grunted. Somehow it pained him to hear the girl refer to her piratical activities. Before he could make any other reply, they came suddenly into a large natural cavern, beyond which showed the narrow opening which the Peri had indicated as the place of the electrostatic seal. A single light shed a dim radiance from far above, and in the faint luminosity he perceived a narrow, deep gash, a gorge or pit, that crossed the chamber irons wall to wall, and even split the walls in dark tunnels to right and left.
"Here is our crawler trap,"
said the girl. She indicated a curious span across the chasm, a single heavy girder of metal that bridged the 20-foot gap in 4 sharp zigzags. A precariously narrow bridge, the girder was no more than 12 inches in width. "Copper," he said.
"Yes, apparently there are no such things as copper feeders to destroy our bridge. Do you see how the trap works? The crystal crawlers have no eyes nor sense of touch, they just crawl. The chances are infinitely against any of them moving at the proper angles to cross the gap. They go crashing down and crawl away below, although one blundered across once. Most of them aren't dangerous, except to whatever they feed on." She gestured. "Beyond the seal is our air supply. There's a regular frozen subterranean sea of neon, argon, and oxygen, and we can draw on it almost forever. Don't you want to cross over and look at it?"
Keen stepped to the brink of the chasm and peered down. It was deep. The light from above trickled away into a mysterious darkness, where only a few faint sparkles responded. Crystals, doubtless, for a slow flicker of movement showed. He scowled at the precarious slenderness of the copper zigzag, and then, cautiously, he abandoned dignity, dropped to his knees, and crept slowly across on all fours. It was only when he reached the far side and stood erect that he became conscious of the Peri's contemptuous sniff of laughter, and turned to see her walk casually and steadily across the angling span, balancing as easily as if she trod a wide roadway. He flushed a slow red. The girl had nerves of steel, true enough, but he realized she had done this as a deliberate taunt. She strode to the narrow opening where he now perceived the ring of copper points whence issued the electrostatic field, and above, on the roof, a suspended emergency lock like that at the outer arch.
"There," she said, pointing. "You can see it."
He squinted into the darkness. A dozen feet away, the passage seemed to widen again, but into such a vast hollow that the light from behind him failed utterly to show its bounds. But dimly and faintly, as a sea of ectoplasm, he made out a shimmering, illimitable expanse of white, a vast subterranean drift of Pluto's fossil air.
"There goes the pipe to it," said the Peri. "We can get all we need by the simple process of heat. But now and then we have to lengthen the pipe. That's why this end of our colony is sealed by electrostatic. Oh!"
She broke off in a startled scream. Keen whirled. The cave floor between the two of them and the bridge was covered with a rustling, irregular parade of blackish crystals. "What's the matter?" he gasped. "We can kick them aside." He moved as if to do so.
"No!"
cried the Peri. She seized his arm, dragging him back.
"They're carbon feeders. Don't you understand? They're carbon feeders. Your body has carbon. Look out!"